Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the second Coil of Bahamut Turn 3, also known as Turn 8. In this turn, we face the Avatar. Luckily for you, I have no stupid puns for this one. My name is Ms. Tech, and I'll be your dungeon guide. The Avatar is a stationary boss that, along with a few basic attacks, will use 4 towers in his defense against us. These towers play a major part in this fight, so we'll be covering them first. There are 4 towers at each cardinal point that have fixed abilities for the duration of the fight. The only thing that changes is in what order they'll come up and how many you'll have to deal with in each phase. Before we get into specifics, let's take a look at basic tower mechanics. If you see this, the tower is not yet active. As soon as the tower spawns, you'll notice the actual tower pop up, a bunch of flashy lights in the semicircle depending on what tower it is, and 5 red sections that will charge up every 15 seconds. When a tower hits 5 charges, it will do its special ability and fall back into its inert state. 20 seconds after the last tower goes down, the next tower set will spawn. Any player that steps into the glowing semicircle when a tower is up will grant the tower a charge. This will also place a 90-second debuff on the player that increases the amount of damage they take from triggering a tower, but not damage from any other source. To avoid double stacking these debuffs as much as possible, it's best to set up a rotation of players for each tower set. Note that you may have to stack debuffs in later phases depending on RNGesus, so players triggering towers should be wary of their health and stack number before jumping in. So why make players run into these towers? If towers charge up at the exact same frequency, for example, they gain their first charge at the same time, the Avatar will gain 2 buffs that increase the amount of damage he deals and increases his defense. If more than one tower maxes its charges at the same time, the Avatar will wipe the raid. The main goal in this fight is pushing towers in such a way to keep the Avatar from gaining stacks and allowing you to safely deal with each tower mechanic as they all max out. These towers will spawn in sets of 2 to 3 throughout the entire fight. How you handle each tower set is completely dependent on your own raid group and what you feel comfortable with. I will of course show you how our raid group handles each phase, but do keep in mind that if you do not like something that you see here, you can alter the strat to fit your own needs. Now let's look at each tower and their mechanics. The western and southern towers, marked in our group as B and C, are defensive reaction towers. Once these towers fully charge, they burst out a massive raid-wide AoE blast. Healers will need to shield and heal through this. The north tower, marked in our group as A, is the Dreadnaught tower. At max charge, it will spawn a Dreadnaught that must be handled accordingly. This is very similar to the Dreadnaught from turn 4, so watch out for his cleave and burn him down ASAP. The east tower is the Landmine tower. Once it fills up, it will spawn 3 landmines anywhere on the platform except for in each tower semicircle and under the boss. If not manually triggered, these landmines will instantly wipe the raid after 15 seconds. The way we deal with this is to assign 2 to 3 DPS to handle any mines that spawn in the north part of the room, while the tank handles the southern part of the room. Stepping into these mines will do around 2,000 damage to the player and knock them backwards. Players triggering these mines need to be mindful of where they're getting knocked back. You do not want to accidentally land on a second mine or into a tower circle and push that tower in before you're ready. Now that the towers are out of the way, let's look at the Avatar's own abilities. The most obvious one is a spicy cleave called Diffusion Ray that will place a bleed on anyone it hits. Tanks need to be sure to position the Avatar away from the raid, and healers can dispel the bleed as necessary. Throughout the fight, the Avatar will also throw out a homing missile on a random player, marked by a fairly obvious white line that links that player to the boss. This mechanic works very much like the snipers in Brayflox Hard. The closest player to the boss to intercept the line will steal the target and eat any of its hits. To deal with Homing Beacon, we assign 1 player to be on the lookout for this line and drag the homing missile away from the rest of the group. When it hits, Homing Missile does a fair amount of splash damage to the player and anyone around him. We prefer to use our monk to deal with Homing Missile as he's usually the closest player to the boss, and he's pretty good at it. Another ability to be on the lookout throughout the fight is Gaseous Bomb, or what I lovingly refer to as Sky Poop. This is a fairly high damage strike that will target 1 player with a red laser from the sky. The blast damage can be split between players, and stacking together will reduce overall damage. These 3 abilities will occur throughout the fight, so be on the constant lookout for them. Now let's look at each phase and any specific mechanics you'll have to face. We begin by moving into our specific positions. We use a one-tank strategy and prefer to stack for the majority of the fight behind the avatar's left leg to counter and simplify the majority of the mechanics. Remember to heal through the cleaves, drag a homing missile out of the group, stack tight for Sky Poo, and get ready for the first set of towers. In Phase 1, towers Dread and West will spawn first. We begin this set by sending 2 people into the Dread Tower. The goal is to deal with the Dreadnaught damage before the Western Tower explodes. As soon as the Dreadnaught spawns, the tank should be ready with cooldowns and provoke while the rest of the raid gets ready to burn down the Dreadnaught. Once that ad is down, you'll have a little bit of breathing room before the defensive maneuver tower goes off. Healers take this time to shield, heal, and regen some mana. The next set of towers is Landmines and West. We have another 2 people push the landmine tower and let West charge up naturally. Again, the tank will have to keep an eye on their side of the platform and the assigned DPS on theirs. The raid group should be mindful of any landmines that spawn near them. Repositioning might be necessary to avoid excess damage. Once all the landmines are clear, be sure to get back into position. Phase 2 begins at about 2 minutes and 40 seconds into the fight and will last until 35% or 7 minutes in, whichever comes first. In this phase, the avatar will gain 2 new abilities that you'll have to deal with until the next phase. The first new ability you'll encounter in Phase 2 is Brainjack. This is an ability cast on the avatar's primary target that will confuse or mind control the tank and cause them to start whacking away at the closest raid player to them. Since we don't want the tank running around after the raid and meat spinning the boss, we assign 1 player, in our case the same player that handles our homing missiles, to step into the boss's hitbox during Brainjack. This minimizes the movement of the mind-controlled tank and maintains the rest of the raid's positioning for all of the other mechanics. Brainjack will last 9 seconds and is immediately followed by a homing missile. So once that assigned player is done being a tank punching bag, they need to immediately move away to become a missile punching bag. The other new ability is Ballistic Missiles. This ability will bind 2 players into either small or large circles and blast them and anyone inside them to death, unless you split the damage appropriately. Small circles need 2 and only 2 players within them for the affected players to survive. Big circles need 3 and only 3 players to survive. Any more or any less will result in the death of any players caught within those circles. The positioning required can be pretty delicate, so make sure the whole raid is tightly stacked in preparation for each ballistic missile. You may also find it useful to assign 3 players to a hierarchy of responsibility for stepping into the larger circles as needed. That way, you'll know exactly who is stepping in depending on whoever else is caught in the missile bind. Now, there are 3 possible combinations of ballistic missile to deal with. The first and easiest one is 2 small circles spawning. Since you're all perfect little raiders, you'll be stacked so well that the small circles will spawn directly on top of one another. With this combo, anyone not bound needs to run out of the circles and wait for the missiles to strike. Easy peasy. The next easiest combo is 2 large circles. Again, being stacked up will already satisfy 2 of the 3-player requirement to survive the large missiles. As such, the standby player needs to be ready to step in anywhere in the circles while everyone else moves away. The last possible combination is a small and a large circle together. This combo requires a little bit more awareness. Stacked up, the 2 bound players will automatically satisfy the 2-player requirement for the small circle, and a 2 of 3-player requirement for the big one. In this case, the standby player needs to be ready to step into the large circle and only the large circle. Watch your big toes here, folks. Accidentally crossing into the smaller circle will lead to death, so be sure to only stand at the edge of the large circle, as far away as possible from the smaller circle. The challenge of Phase 2 comes from juggling all of these abilities while continuing to push towers. At the start of Phase 2, you'll deal with your first ballistic missiles, then have the Dread and West towers become active. We again send 2 players into the Dreadnaught and let the West charge up naturally. With the timing, you'll have to deal with Brainjack, followed immediately by Homing Missile, and eventually your first Dreadnaught. Remember to keep an eye out on the West tower and heal through its defensive maneuvers. The next set is Landmines and West. We again send 2 players into the landmine tower and let the West charge naturally. Deal with the everything. Next set is Dread and Landmines. We send 2 people into the landmine tower again. With this timing, you'll clear your landmines and get Brainjack just in time for the next Dreadnaught to come out, which will happen at the same time as Homing Missile, and followed quickly by Ballistic Missiles. Lots of things are happening here, so remember to keep your eyes open and your cooldown buttons ready to go. Phase 3 begins at 35% or after 7 minutes of pulling the boss. In this phase, we lose the special abilities from Phase 2 and instead will have to deal with something called Allagan Field. Allagan Field will affect one player for 30 seconds. At the end of this duration, the player will blast everyone with a raid-wide AoE that hits for double the amount of damage that player took while debuffed with Field. That means, as soon as Allagan Field goes up, that player gets super special treatment until the debuff is gone. The player should also be avoiding as much damage as possible. That means moving out of the group to avoid Gaseous Bomb, avoiding tower triggers, landmines, dreadnoughts, the whole shebang. Healers should keep up Stone Skin and Adlos and Sacred Soil when possible on that player to help reduce any damage coming in. Ultimately, the less damage that player takes, the less burst damage you'll have to deal with later. Once Allagan Field drops, the raid will have 10 seconds before the next one goes out. In this phase, how you deal with the outgoing damage is completely dependent on how you choose to push towers. Find out what works best for you. We prefer to push our towers in such a way that we eat the defensive maneuver blasts in the 10-second frame where no one has Allagan Field. We find that this helps reduce the amount of damage going out, but again, you can choose to push towers in whatever way suits you as long as you remember to take each ability in stride. In this last phase, Allagan Field will go up, followed by 3 towers at once. The first set is the Landmine, the South, and the West towers. Here we get a little creative. We begin by sending 2 people into the West tower, 1 person into the Landmine tower, and let the South tower charge on its own for now. With this timing, as soon as Allagan Field explodes, we have another person run into the West tower to instantly force the defensive maneuver blast. We do this specifically in between the Allagan Field casts to ensure that we're not getting hit by this AoE when a field is up. Following this explosion, the next Allagan Field will go up, we deal with the landmines and wait for that second field to explode. Once that explodes and we heal up, we send the tank to trigger the South tower, forcing defensive maneuver yet again in between Allagan Fields. The next Allagan Field will go up again, and next you'll deal with the West, the Dread, and the Landmine towers. Here, we push 3 people into the Dread tower, 1 into the Landmine tower, and let the West charge naturally. The intention here is to spawn the Dread right as the Allagan Field explodes. Kill the Dread, deal with landmines, and decide if you want to push or shield through the West tower's defensive maneuvers. The next and final set of towers is West, South, and Landmines. You've already dealt with this combination, so it's nothing you haven't already seen. The boss has an enraged timer of 11 minutes, at which point he will cast Atomic Ray. Should this cast go off, you are doomed, so be sure to push as much DPS in each phase to avoid running into this problem. To keep this video as short as possible, I've included a summary of each tower set in the description below. Check it out if you have any questions about our particular order. And there you have it, the Avatar. Congratulations on your new loot, oil up some gear, and move on to the next and final turn. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.